The entire headquarters froze when the alien queen's daughter rushed forward and embraced me. Part 1. The Nevada desert was quiet that night. Lieutenant Jake Morrison was driving his patrol truck along the same dusty road he had driven 100 times before. The stars above were bright and clear, and the radio played old country songs that helped him stay awake during the long hours. Then he saw it. A streak of fire cut across the sky, moving too fast and too low to be a plane. Jake slammed on his brakes and watched as the object crashed somewhere in the distance, maybe 3 miles north. A cloud of dust and smoke rose into the air, lit from below by flames. His training told him to call it in. His training told him to wait for backup. But something else, something deeper, told him to drive toward the crash. Jake turned his truck off the road and pushed through the rough desert terrain. His heart was beating fast, and his hands were tight on the steering wheel. He did not know what he would find, but he knew he had to see it for himself. When he reached the crash site, he could not believe his eyes. The craft was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was about the size of a school bus, but the shape was all wrong for any human aircraft. The metal, if it was metal, seemed to change colors when he looked at it. Blues became greens, became purples, like oil floating on water. The craft was burning. Flames licked at the strange hull, and smoke poured from a large crack in the side. Jake grabbed his flashlight and his first aid kit from the truck. He knew he should not get close. He knew the smart thing was to drive away and pretend he had seen nothing. Then he heard the sound. It was a cry. Weak and scared, but clearly a cry for help. The voice was strange, with tones that did not sound quite human, but the meaning was clear. Someone was trapped inside, and they were afraid. Jake ran toward the burning craft. The heat hit him like a wall. He covered his face with his arm and pushed through the crack in the hull. Inside, the air was thick with smoke that burned his lungs. He swept his flashlight across the wreckage. Looking for the source of the cry, he found her in what looked like the main cabin. She was humanoid, meaning she had 2 arms, 2 legs, and a face with eyes and a mouth. But she was not human. Her skin was a soft violet color, like the sky just after sunset. Her eyes were large and filled with tears that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. Her hair, if it was hair, was silver and fell past her shoulders. Her leg was trapped under a heavy beam that had fallen from the ceiling. She looked up at Jake with an expression of pure terror. She said something in a language he could not understand, but her tone was begging. She was begging him not to hurt her. Jake held up his hands to show he meant no harm. He pointed at the beam and then at himself, trying to show her that he wanted to help. She watched him with those large, frightened eyes, but she did not try to stop him. He worked for almost an hour. The beam was heavy and the angle was bad. His hands got burned on the strange metal, which seemed to hold heat longer than normal materials. The smoke grew thicker, and he knew the fire was spreading. If he did not get her out soon, they would both die. Finally, the beam moved enough for her to pull her leg free. Jake did not wait for thanks or questions. He scooped her up in his arms, careful to avoid her injured leg, and carried her out of the burning craft. The cool desert air hit his face like a blessing. He carried her away from the wreck, putting distance between them and the flames. When he finally set her down on the sandy ground, she looked up at him with an expression he would never forget. It was confusion. Deep, complete confusion. She spoke again, still in that strange language. But even without understanding the words, Jake knew what she was asking. She was asking why. Why had he risked his life for her? Why had he not left her to die? Why was he helping a creature he did not know, from a world he had never seen? Jake did not have an answer that he could explain. He just shrugged and pointed at her leg, which was bleeding a dark blue liquid. She needed medical help. His truck was still running nearby. He knew he should radio the base. He knew there were protocols for situations like this, even if no one had ever expected them to be used. But when he looked at the fear in her eyes, when he saw how she flinched at the sound of his radio crackling, he made a different choice. He picked her up again and carried her to his truck. He wrapped her in a blanket from his emergency kit and placed her gently in the passenger seat. Then he started driving, not toward the base, but toward his grandfather's old cabin in the mountains. It was 20 miles in the opposite direction, far from anyone who might ask questions. She watched him the whole drive. She did not speak, but her eyes never left his face. She was studying him, trying to understand this strange creature who had saved her life for no reason she could see. The cabin was small and old, but it was clean and safe. Jake carried her inside and laid her on the bed. He got his first aid kit and looked at her wounded leg. The injury was bad, but not as bad as he had feared. The bone did not seem broken, just badly bruised and cut. He cleaned the wound as gently as he could. She winced but did not cry out. He bandaged her leg with human supplies, hoping they would work on her alien body. They seemed to help. That first night, neither of them slept. Jake sat in a chair by the window, watching for any sign that someone had followed them. The alien girl lay in his bed, watching him. Just before dawn, she spoke. Her voice was soft and musical, and the words were still in her language. But this time, she pointed at herself. She was telling him her name Dot. It was long and complicated, with sounds his human mouth could not make. But he tried to repeat it, and she smiled just a little. It was the first time he had seen her smile, and it changed her whole face. Jake pointed at himself and said his name. She tried to repeat it, and her version came out sounding like Jake. He smiled back at her. Dot. It was a beginning. Over the following days, Jake learned that the universe was much larger and much more complicated than he had ever imagined. And the alien girl, who he would come to call Lyra because her real name was too hard to say, learned that not all species were as cruel as she had been taught. Sometimes one person could change everything. The entire headquarters froze when the alien queen's daughter rushed forward and embraced me. Part 2. 3 weeks passed in the mountain cabin, and in that time, everything changed. Lyra learned English faster than Jake thought possible. By the third day, she could say simple words like water, food, and thank you. By the end of the first week, she could form basic sentences. By the second week, she was reading the old books Jake had on his shelves, her large violet eyes moving across the pages with incredible speed. Jake was amazed. He had struggled to learn Spanish in high school, and here she was, picking up a completely alien language in days. When he asked her about it, she explained that her people were trained from birth to learn quickly. Languages, sciences, politics. A princess of the Volanthi Empire was expected to master many skills. That was how Jake learned who she really was. Lyra was not just any alien. She was the daughter of Queen Thesara, ruler of an empire that controlled 30 star systems. Her people had been watching Earth for many years, studying humans from afar. They had seen the wars, the violence, the endless conflicts between nations. They had decided that humans were a primitive and dangerous species, not worth contacting. Lyra had been raised to believe the same thing. Her tutors had shown her videos of human battles, of cities destroyed and people suffering. She had grown up thinking that Earth was a planet of monsters, and then she crashed here, expecting to die or to be captured and tortured. Instead, she found Jake. He still needs to understand. She thought as she watched him cook dinner one evening. He risked his life for me. He burned his hands on my ship. He gave up his normal life to hide me here. And he asked for nothing in return. This did not match anything she had been taught about humans. Jake noticed her staring and smiled. He had a kind smile, she had decided. Not like the cold, formal expressions she was used to seeing in the imperial court. His smile was warm and real. "Are you feeling better?" he asked, nodding at her leg. Lyra looked down at her bandaged leg. The human medicine had worked surprisingly well. The pain was almost gone, and she could walk short distances without help. "Yes," she said. "You are a good healer." Jake laughed. "I am not a healer. I just know basic first aid." "Any human would do the same." Lyra shook her head slowly. "No, I do not think any human would do what you did." "I think you are special." Jake looked uncomfortable with the praise. He turned back to the stove, where he was making something he called pasta. It smelled wonderful, and Lyra had discovered that she loved human food. It was so different from the nutrition supplements she had grown up with in the palace. That night, after dinner, Lyra told him the full truth. She explained that she had been running away. Her mother, the queen, had arranged a marriage for her. The marriage was political, meant to create an alliance between the Volanti Empire and another powerful family. Lyra had never met her future husband, but she had heard stories about him. He was cruel and cold, and he saw her as nothing more than a prize to be won. She had stolen a small ship and fled into space, hoping to find somewhere to hide. But the patrol vessels had found her. They had damaged her ship, and she had crashed on the nearest planet. Earth. "I was so scared," she admitted. "I thought your people would hurt me. I thought they would cut me open to see how I worked." "That is what we would do," she added quietly. "That is what my people have done to other species." Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out and took her hand. His skin was warm against hers. "We are not perfect," he said. "Humans have done terrible things. We have hurt each other and destroyed parts of our own world. But we are trying to be better. And most of us, when we see someone who needs help, we help them. That is just who we are." Lyra felt tears forming in her eyes. In her entire life, no one had ever spoken to her with such simple kindness. Not her mother, not her tutors, not anyone in the imperial court. She had been a princess, a symbol, a piece in a political game. But Jake treated her like a person. The next morning, everything changed again. Jake had been checking his phone, something he did rarely to avoid being tracked. His face went pale as he read a message. "They found the crash site," he said. "The military has been searching the area for weeks. They know someone survived." Lyra felt fear grip her heart. "They will come for me." Jake nodded slowly. He looked at her for a long moment, and she could see him thinking. She knew what the smart choice would be. He should turn her in. He should save himself and let the authorities deal with her. "I know someone," he said finally. "An old friend. Colonel Daniel Hayes. He's a good man, and he has connections high up. If anyone can help us, it is him. You would trust your friend with this secret?" Jake took a deep breath. "I trust him with my life. And now I am trusting him with yours." He made the call. Within 48 hours, Lyra found herself in a helicopter, flying toward a destination she did not know. Jake sat beside her, holding her hand. He had refused to leave her side, even when the military officers had tried to separate them. "She is scared," he had told them. "I am staying with her." And he did. The helicopter landed at a massive complex in a city Lyra did not recognize. There were humans everywhere, wearing suits and uniforms, speaking into phones and rushing between buildings. They all stopped and stared as she was led inside. Lyra wanted to run. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to flee. But Jake squeezed her hand, and she found the courage to keep walking. The first meeting was with a woman named Ambassador Patricia Walsh. She was older, with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. But her voice was gentle when she spoke. "Welcome to Earth," she said. "I know you must be frightened. I want you to know that no one here wants to hurt you. We just want to talk." Lyra did not believe her. How could she? Every lesson she had ever learned told her that this was a trap. but Jake believed her. And Lyra was starting to trust Jake more than she trusted anything else. Over the following months, Lyra learned that humans were far more complicated than she had been taught. They argued constantly. They disagreed about everything. Different nations had different ideas, and they seemed unable to agree on even simple things. But they also asked her opinion. They wanted to know what she needed, what she wanted, how they could make her comfortable. This was something completely new. In her empire, no one asked what you wanted. You simply did what you were told. When she expressed this confusion to Jake one evening, watching the sunset through the reinforced windows of her room, he smiled sadly. "We believe every person matters," he said. "Even princesses. Even aliens." Lyra felt that strange feeling in her chest again. The feeling she had no name for. The feeling that only appeared when Jake was near. She did not know it yet, but that feeling would change the fate of two civilizations. The entire headquarters froze when the alien queen's daughter rushed forward and embraced me. Part 3, 8 months after the crash. The Volanti fleet appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system. The news spread across the planet within hours. Every television, every phone, every computer screen showed the same images. Massive ships, each one larger than any structure humans had ever built, floating silently in space. The flagship alone was the size of a small moon, and it blocked out the stars behind it. Panic spread almost as fast as the news. People ran to stores and emptied the shelves. Governments activated their emergency plans. Military forces around the world went on high alert, even though everyone knew that human weapons would be useless against such power. Lyra watched the news from her room in the Geneva facility. Her hands were shaking. She knew those ships. She knew the symbols painted on their hulls. Most of all, she knew who was coming for her. Her mother had finally arrived. Jake found her standing by the window, her face pale and her eyes filled with fear. He did not say anything. He just stood beside her and waited. "She will destroy this planet," Lyra whispered. "If she thinks I've been harmed, if she thinks your people have hurt me, she will burn everything." Jake nodded slowly. "Then we need to show her that you have not been harmed." The human governments, despite their many disagreements, came together with surprising speed. Within days, they had agreed on a plan. They would not hide. They would not fight. They would invite the queen to come and collect her daughter in person, with full diplomatic honors. That many people thought this was insane. The aliens could destroy them easily. Why not at least try to fight? Why not go down swinging? But the leaders had listened to Lyra. They had learned about Volanti culture, about their pride and their sense of honor. A direct challenge would be seen as an insult, and it would guarantee destruction. But an invitation, a show of respect, that was something unexpected. That might make the queen curious enough to listen. The message was sent. The queen accepted. 3 days later, a shuttle from the flagship descended toward Earth. It landed at the newly constructed United Terran headquarters, a gleaming complex of glass and steel that humanity had built in record time. They had decided that if they were going to meet their first alien visitors, they would do it properly. They would stand tall and show the universe what humanity could build when it worked together. Jake stood in the main reception hall with the other members of the human delegation. He was wearing a formal military uniform that felt stiff and uncomfortable. Beside him, Lyra wore traditional Volanti robes that her people had sent ahead. She looked beautiful and terrified. "Are you ready?" Jake asked quietly. Lyra shook her head. "I have not seen my mother in almost 2 years. She was never kind to me, even before I ran away. I do not know what she will do." Jake wanted to say something comforting, but he did not know what words would help. So he simply took her hand and held it tight. The doors of the reception hall opened. Queen Desara entered. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, and she moved with the grace of someone who had never doubted her own power. Her skin was a deeper violet than Lyra's, and her eyes were cold as winter stars. She wore armor that seemed to be made of liquid metal, shifting and flowing with her movements. Behind her walked 6 guards, each one carrying weapons that Jake could not even identify. The Queen's gaze swept across the room, taking in the human diplomats, the security officers, the cameras, and lights. Her expression did not change. She looked at them the way a human might look at insects, with mild curiosity and no concern. Then her eyes found Lyra. For a long moment, mother and daughter stared at each other. The Queen's face was unreadable. Lyra's was full of emotions that she could not hide: fear, anger, and something that might have been hope. The entire headquarters was silent. No one moved. No one breathed. Ambassador Walsh stepped forward, ready to begin the formal greeting. The protocols had been practiced for days. Every word, every gesture had been planned to show respect without submission. But Lyra moved first. She let go of Jake's hand and walked toward her mother. The guards tensed and human security officers reached for their weapons. But Lyra ignored them all. She walked past the ambassador, past the honor guard, past every carefully planned protocol. And then she stopped. She did not embrace her mother. She did not bow or kneel. Instead, she turned around and walked back to where Jake was standing. She took his hand again, and this time she pulled him close. In front of everyone, in front of the Queen and the guards and the cameras that broadcast the scene to billions of viewers, Lyra wrapped her arms around Jake Morrison. She embraced the human who had saved her life. The entire headquarters froze. No one knew what to do. The diplomats had not planned for this. The guards did not know whether to attack or stand down. Even the Queen, who had ruled for 300 years and had seen things that would break lesser minds, seemed stunned. When Lyra finally pulled back from the embrace, she kept her hand in Jake's. She turned to face her mother, and her voice was clear and strong. This human saved my life. He risked everything for me, a stranger from another world. He asked for nothing in return. He showed me kindness when he had every reason to show me fear. The Queen said nothing. Her eyes moved from her daughter's face to Jake's, studying him with an intensity that made him want to look away. But he held her gaze. You expected to find me hurt, Lyra continued. You expected to find me a prisoner, being tortured or studied. That is what we would have done. That is what I was taught to expect. But these people are not like us, mother. They are different. Different how? The Queen finally spoke. Her voice was low and dangerous. Lyra squeezed Jake's hand. They asked me what I wanted. They asked how they could help me. They treated me like a person, not like a possession. In all my years in the palace, no one ever did that. Not even you. The Queen's expression flickered. For just a moment, Jake thought he saw something behind the cold mask. Something that looked almost like pain. But then the mask was back, and the Queen turned to face the human delegation. We have much to discuss, she said. The entire headquarters froze when the alien Queen's daughter rushed forward and embraced me. Part 4. The negotiations began the next morning. But the real conversation happened that night. After the formal meetings had ended. After the diplomats had gone to their rooms and the guards had taken their positions, Queen Nasara sent a message. She wanted to speak with Jake, alone. Lyra was terrified. She begged him not to go. Her mother was dangerous, she warned. The Queen did not ask for private meetings unless she was planning something. But Jake knew he had to go. Everything depended on what happened next. 2 guards escorted him to the Queen's temporary quarters. The room was simple by royal standards. Just a bed, a table, and 2 chairs. The Queen sat in one of them, her armor replaced by simpler robes. She looked smaller without it, almost ordinary. Almost. Sit, she said. It was not a request. Jake sat in the chair across from her. His heart was pounding, but he kept his face calm. He had faced death before. He could face a queen. For a long moment, the Tsar said nothing. She just looked at him with those cold, ancient eyes. Jake felt like she was reading his soul, seeing every secret he had ever kept. "You love my daughter," she said finally. Jake did not look away. "Yes, I do, and she loves you. This much is clear. What I cannot understand is why." Jake took a deep breath. "Your daughter is kind and intelligent and brave. She sees the good in people, even when they do not deserve it. Loving her is easy. The hard part is understanding why she would love me." The queen tilted her head slightly. In her culture, humility was rare. Most beings she met were filled with pride and ambition. This human was different. "You saved her from the crash," she said. "Why? You did not know who she was. You did not know if she would live. You could have walked away, and no one would have blamed you." Jake thought about the question carefully. "I heard her crying for help. I could not walk away from that. No one with any heart could. Many would. Many have. I have seen countless species, and most of them would have left a stranger to die if there was any risk to themselves. Then I am sorry for them," Jake said simply. "That must be a lonely way to live." The queen was silent again. When she spoke, her voice was softer than before. "I have ruled for 300 years. I have made decisions that shaped the fate of billions. I have been told that I am wise and powerful and just. But tonight, my own daughter stood before me and said that a human she has known for less than a year has shown her more kindness than I ever did." Jake did not know what to say. He had expected anger, threats, perhaps even violence. He had not expected this. The queen stood and walked to the window. Outside, the city lights stretched to the horizon. Millions of humans living their short lives in their small homes. "We have watched your species for a long time," she said. "We saw your wars, your cruelty, your endless conflicts. We decided that you were too dangerous and too primitive to contact. If you ever develop the technology to leave your planet, we plan to stop you. For the safety of the galaxy." Jake felt cold. He had suspected something like this, but hearing it stated so plainly was different. And now, Desara continued. "I find myself wondering if we were wrong." She turned to face him. "When we arrived, we expected your people to react with fear or aggression. Instead, you invited us to land. You offered hospitality. You asked for peace." "We are not perfect," Jake said. "We have done terrible things to each other, but we are trying to be better. We believe that is possible." The queen studied him for a long moment. "Do you know what love means in my culture?" Jake shook his head. "It is weakness. We are taught from birth that attachment is dangerous. It can be exploited by enemies. It can cloud judgment and lead to mistakes. I raised my daughter to believe this. I arranged a marriage for her that would strengthen the empire, and I did not ask if she wanted it. Her feelings did not matter. Only power mattered." She paused, and Jake saw something change in her face. The mask slipped, just for a moment, and he saw the weight of centuries pressing down on her. "I have not spoken to anyone like this in a very long time," she admitted. Queens do not confess their doubts. "We do not admit that we might have been wrong." Jake leaned forward. "Maybe that is part of the problem." The Tsar almost smiled. "You are bold for a primitive creature. I am told that is a human trait." The queen returned to her chair. "Your species is strange. You are fragile, and you die so quickly. You fight among yourselves over things that do not matter. You make decisions based on feelings instead of logic. But," she continued, "you also do things that make no sense. You help strangers for no reward. You sacrifice yourselves for people you have never met. You create art and music just because it makes you happy. You fall in love even though you know you will lose each other someday. She looked at Jake with an expression he could not read. I have conquered 12 worlds. I have crushed rebellions and destroyed enemies. I have been feared across 30 star systems. But in all that time, no one has ever looked at me the way my daughter looks at you. No one has ever risked everything for me just because I needed help. Jake felt the weight of the moment. He understood that this was unprecedented. Queens did not bare their souls to strangers. Whatever was happening here was important. I made mistakes with Lyra, Desara said quietly. I taught her that feelings were weakness. I never told her I was proud of her. I never told her that I loved her. I do not even know if I know how to love anymore. She met Jake's eyes, but I think you can teach her. And perhaps, in time, she can teach me. Jake did not know what to say. So he said the only thing that felt true. She already has. She is the bravest person I know. And she learned that from somewhere. For the first time since he had met her, the Queen's eyes softened. It was only for a moment, but it was enough. Tomorrow, she said, we will talk about the future. There will be negotiations and treaties and many complicated discussions. But tonight I wanted to thank you. Thank me for showing my daughter that there is more than one way to be strong. For showing her that kindness is not weakness. She turned toward the window again. And for showing me that perhaps, even after 300 years, I still have things to learn. Jake stood to leave. At the door, he turned back. Your daughter loves you, he said. Even after everything, she still loves you. That means there is still hope. The Queen did not turn around, but Jake saw her shoulders shake, just once. He left her alone with her thoughts. The entire headquarters froze when the alien Queen's daughter rushed forward and embraced me. Part 5. The formal negotiations lasted 3 weeks. But the true work took much longer. Queen Nasara returned to the meeting rooms. The morning after her private conversation with Jake, the human diplomats noticed something different about her immediately. She was still cold and formal, still every inch the ruler of an empire. But she listened more. She considered their words before responding. And sometimes, just sometimes, she almost smiled. The terms of the agreement were complicated. There were questions about territory and trade, about technology sharing and cultural exchange. Many of the Volanti advisors argued that humanity should be treated as a lesser species, brought into the empire as subjects rather than partners. They pointed to human history, to the wars and the violence, as proof that these creatures could not be trusted. But the Queen overruled them. You see their weaknesses, she said during one heated debate. I see something else. They saved my daughter when they could have let her die. They invited us to their world when they could have tried to fight. They chose peace when they had every reason to choose fear. She looked at her advisors with those ancient, powerful eyes. Any species that can make such choices is worth more than the sum of its failures. The agreement they reached was unlike anything in the history of the Volanti Empire. It was not a conquest or a surrender. It was a true alliance between equals, with both sides agreeing to respect the other. The galaxy watched in amazement. The Volanti had never treated anyone as equals before. Many other empires and civilizations sent messages of confusion and concern. Some accused the Queen of going soft. Others whispered that the humans must have used some kind of trick or magic to influence her mind. But those who knew the truth understood what had really happened. Single act of kindness had changed the course of history. Lyra became the official ambassador between their peoples. She was given a small ship and a crew of both humans and Volanti, and she traveled between the two worlds, carrying messages and building understanding. It was not always easy. There were misunderstandings and conflicts, moments when it seemed like the alliance might fall apart. But Lyra never gave up. And Jake traveled with her. The military had offered him promotions and honors. They wanted to make him a symbol, a hero of first contact. But Jake turned them all down. His place was at Lyra's side, not in some office or parade. They married 1 year after the alliance was signed. It was a small ceremony, held on Jake's grandfather's land in the mountains where everything had started. Lyra wore human white and Volanthe purple, and Jake wore the same uncomfortable formal uniform he had worn when the Queen first arrived. The Queen attended. She stood among the human guests and watched her daughter exchange vows with the man who had saved her. And when the ceremony was over, she did something no one expected. She embraced her daughter Dot. It was awkward and stiff. The embrace of someone who had forgotten how to show affection. But it was real. And when she pulled back, there were tears in her eyes. "I am proud of you," she said. Her voice was quiet, meant only for Lyra. "I should have told you that a long time ago." Lyra cried. Jake pretended not to notice, because he was crying too. The years that followed were not perfect. Nothing ever is. The alliance faced challenges and setbacks. There were people on both sides who distrusted the other, who wanted to go back to the old ways. Wars and conflicts continued in other parts of the galaxy, and Earth was not always safe from them. But something had changed. Humanity was no longer alone. They had proven themselves to the wider universe, not through strength or conquest, but through compassion. Other species began to take notice. Messages arrived from distant worlds, asking about these strange humans who had befriended the Volanthe. Some were curious. Some were afraid. Some were hopeful. Earth became a place where differences were celebrated rather than feared. The technologies shared by the Volanthe helped solve problems that humans had struggled with for generations. And in return, humans taught their new allies something that could not be measured or quantified. They taught them how to hope. Jake and Lyra had 3 children. 2 looked more human, and 1 looked more Volanthe, but they were raised to embrace both parts of their heritage. They grew up knowing that the universe was vast and complicated, but also that kindness could change everything. Queen Desara visited often. She spent long hours with her grandchildren, telling them stories of distant worlds and ancient history. She taught them about the Empire and its traditions, but she also listened to their stories about Earth and its strange customs. She never fully changed. 300 years of ruling had left marks that could not be erased, but she softened around the edges. She learned to laugh at human jokes, even when she did not understand them. She developed a deep love for human music, especially the old country songs that Jake had been listening to the night he first saw Lyra's ship crash on the 10th anniversary of the Alliance. A celebration was held on Earth. Leaders from both species gathered to remember how far they had come. Speeches were given and medals were presented, and everyone said the proper diplomatic things. But the moment everyone remembered came at the end of the night. Jake and Lyra stood on a balcony, looking up at the stars. They were older now, with gray hair and laugh lines around their eyes. But they still held hands the same way they had that first night in the cabin, when everything was uncertain and scary. Do you ever regret it? Lyra asked. Saving me that night? Jake smiled. Not for a single second. Your life would have been so much simpler. Jake shook his head. Simple is not the same as good. Before I met you, I was just going through the motions. Now I have adventures and family and purpose. He turned to face her. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. And I would crash 100 burning ships to find you again. Lyra laughed. That is the most romantic thing you have ever said. I have been practicing. They kissed under the stars. 2 souls from different worlds who had found each other against all odds. And somewhere, watching from her flagship in orbit, Queen Desara smiled. She had learned something important in the years since she first came to Earth. Power was not the only thing that mattered. Conquest was not the only path to greatness. Sometimes, the strongest thing you could do was open your heart and let someone in. The humans had taught her that. Her daughter had taught her that. And Jake Morrison, the ordinary soldier who had run into a burning ship to save a stranger, had changed everything by doing something incredibly simple. He had been kind. In a universe filled with darkness and danger. Kindness was the rarest and most powerful force of all. And humanity, for all its flaws and failures, had it in abundance. That was why the galaxy would never be the same. That was why there was hope. And that was why, when the history books were written, they would remember this story not as a tale of war or conquest, but as the story of how one act of kindness started a new age for everyone. It all began with a crashed ship, a frightened princess, and a man who could not walk away from someone who needed help. It ended with the stars themselves changing, and it all happened because humanity, when given the chance, chose to be good.